Okay, so thanks, Ron. And again, about me, my name's Pete Quagliarello. I'm with a consulting firm called Acceleres, and we specialize in helping customers design and deploy System Center Service Manager. I've been able to work on a number of different Service Manager 2010 projects over the past year and a half or so. And I'm starting to discover 2012, as I'm sure several of you are. In fact, we're going to ask a question in a couple of slides just to try to get an idea of what sort of familiarity people have with Service Manager 2010 or Service Manager 2012. Service Manager, whether 2010 or 2012, is a pretty big application. There's lots to talk about, and we don't necessarily have time to really get into everything today. So I just want to be clear. We're going to try to give you kind of a broad brush overview of the next version of the application. As the title indicates, what to expect, kind of, you know, the big things that you should kind of have in mind, whether you're thinking about upgrading from Service Manager 2010 or whether you're just thinking about implementing Service Manager 2012 from scratch. So we'll give you a kind of a snapshot to start out with. We've got a sort of a summary of what is new and improved in Service Manager 2012. I want to touch on the concept of service management in Service Manager. And then, time permitting, at the very end, I do have a bunch of slides. I've got some screenshots. We could, if we have time, we could go into a bit more detail. Okay, so let's take a little snapshot look at Service Manager. Again, let's just start with 2010, particularly for those who, as the poll indicated, don't have it installed yet. I'm sure most of you know that Service Manager is centered on idle and MOF processes. I think of it and call it a work management application, and it's a distinction I like to make because I like to distinguish it from a technology management application, which it really isn't. It's really about managing things that you do. So we've got these work items, as they're called, in Service Manager. We've got incidents, we've got changes, and we've got problems. So it's really the three kinds of things that we can do in Service Manager 2010. One of the really cool things about Service Manager is this CMDB, this integrated CMDB, which, through connectors, brings in all of this data. It brings in data from AD, it brings in data about our CIs, and potentially about alerts from Operations Manager, CIs from Config Manager. And it's really kind of ready to go out of the box once you've got the connectors configured. And then we can enrich those work items with that configuration data, and we can create relationships. And that's one of, I think, the most powerful and most important features of the application is the fact that you can very easily relate work items and configuration items. And for that matter, you can relate work items to other work items. I can relate incidents to changes, incidents to problems, problems to changes, etc. We've also got, within our CMDB, we've got a knowledge base built in. And again, I think that's another feature that's really nice, particularly when you consider the relationships, how we can not only relate work items and configuration items, but we can relate our knowledge articles to each of those things as well. And hopefully that's getting us to resolution faster, it's enabling us to be more efficient in the way that we handle any one of these work items, give us more visibility into changes, a greater sense of what the impact of a change might be on the environment. And then we've got this integrated functionality, again, kind of back to the connectors. We can do more than just bring this CI data across into our CMDB. We can also get alerts from Operations Manager and create incidents from them if we want to do that. We can actually, we can kick off software distribution through the self-service portal. I don't have the portal in here. I'll be talking a bit about the portal in 2012 in later slides, but just as an example, we can kick off a software distribution request in the portal. It'll create a change in Service Manager, and then it'll ultimately work with SCCM to actually get the package deployed. Now, if we look at Service Manager 2012, we still have our CMDB, and it's structurally still the same. We've got our work items, we've got our configuration items, we've got our knowledge articles. Now, we're going to have more work items, and we'll see that coming up in a later slide. And we're essentially going to have more CIs as well, because we're going to have some new connectors. Specifically, we're going to have in the lower left-hand corner there, we're going to have a connector from VMM in Service Manager 2012. So not only are we going to be able to get data from Active Directory, Operations Manager, and Configuration Manager, but we're also going to be able to get in data about virtual machines from VMM. We're still going to have a data warehouse. I didn't touch on that in the previous slide. If you're familiar with Service Manager 2010, one of the things that I think is very, very strong in 2010 is its reporting. It's got pretty good out-of-the-box reporting, and it offers a lot of possibilities with custom reporting. Reporting is going to change pretty significantly in 2012. It's going to get both easier, it's going to be easier to get data out, and we're going to be able to get more data out. The data warehouse in Service Manager is actually going to contain data from all of the system products. I'm going to touch on that in a later slide, but just to kind of give you an idea, you're going to have more than just your Service Manager data, your work item data, and some of your CI data in the data warehouse in Service Manager 2012. One of the big, big changes in Service Manager 2012 is the self-service portal. We'll see on a later slide, the portal is, the current portal as we know it is not going to be with us too much longer. 2012 is going to a SharePoint-based portal. I think of it, this is just my own thinking, I think of it as a storefront. We're going to be able to do two things there. We're going to have, first of all, a service catalog with a bunch of request offerings. The request offerings are really going to be what you interface with in the portal. If you're an IT consumer, you're going to be able to go there and you're going to be able to say, I need something, whatever it is, whether it's something very straightforward, maybe you need access to a network resource, or you need a piece of software installed, or you need a new mobile device. We're also going to be able to publish data to the portal. So it's going to make it easier to present data. There's a dashboard available today. It's a free download. You can get it for 2010. And it's not bad. This is going to offer a lot more customization. And as I said, I think of this as kind of the storefront. It's going to be where you drive a lot of both end users and people in IT who need data about IT services. And we've also got greater potential for automation through the orchestrator connector, which is going to be another new feature. So you'll actually be able to trigger orchestrator runbooks inside of activities in Service Manager. So if you're familiar with Service Manager now, you know that you have these work items called activities, which are basically child work items to incidents and to changes. There'll be a lot of improvement to activities in Service Manager 2012, and one of the things you'll be able to do, as I say, is actually trigger orchestrator runbooks from within those activities. So again, the intent here with this slide is just to kind of paint the overall picture and give you an idea of all these different components and kind of how all of it works together. And I think it's very important to come back to this concept of the Service Manager CMDB is still the kind of centerpiece. And you can hopefully see through this how data moves around here. I'm going to have a later slide that will present a little bit different view of this. This is where we kind of look ahead to true service management in Service Manager. Okay, so now I'm going to highlight some of the things that are new and improved. I'm not going to go into, I just don't have the time to go into a lot of detail on all of these things. I do have some slides later on. Time permitting, we can probably drill into some of these areas in a bit more detail. So, work items. If you're familiar with 2010, then you know about incidents, change requests, problems, and then we've got, and I mentioned it on the previous slide, we've got these manual activities and these review activities. If you're not familiar, a manual activity is kind of a task. As I say, activities are child work items to incidents and change requests. A review activity is a child to a change request, and that's an activity that allows you to vote on something. So if you think about the change request and the idea that you might want to have approval captured by the application, you could do that with a review activity. So what are we going to see in Service Manager 2012? We're going to see parent-child incident functionality, which you could use perhaps if you wanted to do major incidents. Let's say you had a very, very large incident, you had an outage, and you had lots and lots of calls coming into your service desk. You could set up a parent incident, record the overall outage, and then you could link all of the other incidents as child incidents. You have some flexibility there with how you manage the status, the relationship between the status of the parent and child incidents, as well as how you resolve, if you resolve the child incidents when you resolve the parent incident. So I think that's a useful feature. This second item is, for the customers that we've worked with, one of the biggest new features, service requests. There will be a discrete service request work item in Service Manager 2012. A lot of our customers who've implemented 2010 struggle a bit with the best way to manage things that aren't quite break-fix related, true incidents, and things that don't quite rise to the level of a change. The service request work item is going to fit right in between those two, and it will be kind of the centerpiece of that overall service catalog, which I'll touch on a little bit later on. But very basically, but importantly, the service request is going to facilitate those things that, again, are not really break-fix, but nonetheless do require some sort of approval in some cases. You're also going to have the opportunity through these service requests, specifically through activities, to do some automation if that's what you want to do. Release records are going to work in conjunction with changes and activities that are contained in those changes and in the releases. This is kind of a hard one to describe without some screenshots or even a demo, and I'm frankly still trying to get my head around exactly how to best use this. But the idea is to be able to, if you want to or need to bundle together related changes. Whether you've got a very, very large release, like if you have a critical application where you have very, very infrequent release windows and you really need to very, very tightly plan every aspect of the release, of the introduction of all these changes into the production environment. Or you could potentially use it to manage periodic release windows across your environment. So maybe you do a Thursday night maintenance window or something like that. You'll have the opportunity, one of the things I like about the release record is you have the opportunity to record downtime, which is something that you can't really do, I find you can't really do without some customization in Service Manager 2010. So to actually be able to say, this change is going to produce downtime between 8 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. on Thursday evening. So you'll be able to do that in a release record. Activities are going to become, as I think I'd mentioned on the previous slide, you'll be able to do a lot more with activities. You're going to still have your manual activities. You'll still have your review activities. You'll now have these parallel and sequential activities. And as the names suggest, parallel will mean you can complete the activities in parallel. Sequential will mean that there is a dependency there. You complete the first, then you complete the second. So if you're familiar with Service Manager 2010, you've got parallel activities and incidents, and you've got sequential activities and changes. These are kind of like containers that you'll be able to put into your change requests, your service requests, and your release records, and you'll be able to build out your activities with a little bit more flexibility. These dependent activities are going to connect our changes and our releases together. That's actually how you're going to integrate the two. It's actually at the activity level. And probably one of the biggest things, again, this is right up there with service requests for a lot of our customers, is you've got much more flexible and granular SLA management. If you're using 2010 now, you've got a 24/7 clock, and you can't really have too many different SLAs. You can basically change your SLA based on priority. You can actually still use that functionality. That'll be a legacy feature in 2012. You can create new service level objectives in Service Manager 2012. You'll be able to create different metrics. For example, one thing you're going to be able to do now is you're going to be able to record response time for an incident. You can capture that as a metric. You can set an objective for it, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever you'd like. And then you can use queues to actually apply the different service level objectives. For those who aren't familiar, a queue in Service Manager is a little bit different than a queue in some other products. A queue is basically a group of like work items, a group of changes, a group of problems, a group of service requests. And you can build very specific criteria into a queue. Again, this is one of those things that's best illustrated with visuals. I do have some that we could get to later if folks want to see it. But you're going to be able to do a lot of nice stuff in 2012. Another thing that I don't think I touched on is you'll be able to set up multiple calendars. You'll be able to set up business hour calendars with holidays, which I'm sure a lot of you probably want and need to do. You'll also be able to maintain a 24/7 clock, maybe for your high priority incidents. So a lot of new stuff coming in work items, and again, based on the customers I've worked with, I know a lot of these are going to be welcome and pretty extensively used. All right, so next, kind of working through our diagram here, now we're talking about what you can expect in terms of CIs and connectors. You're going to see all the connectors that you know and love today: Active Directory, Operations Manager, Configuration Manager. We've had most of our customers use the Exchange connector. It's a Microsoft product that is unsupported, officially unsupported, I think is probably the way they say it. While it's not out yet, there is a connector coming out for Service Manager 2012. I don't think it's going to be too much longer. I think they're going to get it out. I may have neglected to mention, for those who are unaware, the beta of Service Manager 2012 was released in very late October, so it's been out for roughly a month and a half now. And the Exchange connector, as I say, if my understanding is correct, is going to be out in the not-too-distant future. And you can do some very, very nice stuff with the Exchange connector. So whatever its supported status is, I strongly recommend it. You're going to get in 2012, you'll have, I think I'd mentioned earlier, connectors for VMM and for Orchestrator. So we're going to be able to bring in data about virtual machines into our CMDB, and then we're going to be able to trigger runbooks from within those activities in our changes or our service requests. And you're going to get some enhancements to the existing connectors because you'll end up with some new functionality in the latest versions of these other System Center products, and the connectors are going to reflect that and allow you to leverage that. Okay, so the data warehouse, reporting, and analytics. I think I mentioned earlier that there are some big changes here. In terms of what's familiar, your built-in reports are still going to be there. And importantly, if you've invested in custom reports, they're going to be there as well. The reporting infrastructure for Service Manager 2010 is SQL reporting services. So you can build custom reports in either, say, Visual Studio or SQL Report Builder. You can publish them to SSRS, and when you do that, they'll be published to the Service Manager 2010 console. And anybody who's got permission to do so can go in and can run those reports. The built-in reports are pretty good, by the way, I feel. And you can get a lot of good data just from the built-in reports. The custom reports come into play typically when you've made some customizations where you've extended the database. Those extensions don't populate the built-in reports. You need to build custom reports. And if you've done that, you know that, it can take some time. You can make an investment in custom reports. Those are going to survive. You'll still be able to view and use your custom reports. What's going to change in 2012 is these OLAP cubes. So what you've got here basically is some pre-aggregated data, and it's going to be coming across multiple sources. It's actually the last bullet on this particular slide, but it's worth noting that Service Manager 2012 is going to be the single data warehouse for all of System Center 2012. So all of the products are going to have their data in Service Manager, and you're going to be able to report across all of that. So just to give you an example, obviously we can do reports on incidents today. We'll be able to do reports on incidents in 2012. But what we'll also be able to do, let's say that we're reporting on incidents for a specific configuration item, running a report for incidents against a specific configuration item. We could also, through Operations Manager, maybe get additional alert data about that CI that wouldn't be an incident. So we could maybe do a ratio of incidents to alerts for that particular CI. So it's going to be nice. Even nicer is going to be the fact that the ad hoc and the self-service is going to be improved. Back to 2010, again, the built-in reports are pretty good. If you know how to use them, it's pretty easy to get data out. You can very easily export to CSV or to Excel if you need to do some work with the data. What you're going to be able to do in 2012 is you're actually going to be able to use Excel. It's worth noting Excel 2010 to get your data from Service Manager 2012, and you'll be able to use pivot tables. So there's no coding required, although you do have to know a little bit about building pivot tables in Excel, but ultimately that's going to be a lot easier than building these custom reports or even just doing SQL queries against the data mart in the Service Manager 2010 data warehouse. And back to the idea of the portal, as I had mentioned earlier, you're going to be able to publish reports and publish metrics to the portal, which is going to be nice. So not only is the portal the storefront for people coming in, but it's going to be kind of a means of presentation of some of this data. So a lot of big changes, and I think this is one of the nicest improvements because the thing I always say is our customers invest so much time putting data into the system. You really do have to think a lot about what you want to get out, what data you want to get out, when you want to get it out, et cetera. And that's only going to get easier in Service Manager 2012. So on to the portal. What to expect with the portal? Important to note, the Service Manager 2010 portal is going away. It's not going to remain in Service Manager 2012. And that may be bad news for some of you who've invested in enhancements or customizations. They did make the source code available sometime, I think, in the spring of last year. And I know some folks got hold of that and made some modifications and some customizations. I think Microsoft recognizes what a big deal the portal is and the desire for more flexibility with respect to self-service. So that's why they're going to this SharePoint-based portal. And going back to this idea of a service catalog, what you're going to have is not so much a service catalog in the portal, but you'll have request offerings. I think I touched on this earlier. There are going to be a bunch of different things that you can request. And you're going to be able to do anything from requesting something small like access to a network device, network resource, to even potentially requesting a virtual machine. That's the kind of thing that could theoretically be totally automated with Service Manager and with integration to VMM. So I think there's going to be a lot of emphasis by Microsoft on what this portal is and what kinds of things it can do. And then reporting and metrics, as we've said, are also going to be available in the portal as well. There's also going to be some, as I understand it, some fairly granular permissions. So you're going to be able to decide, based on user role, who can see what in the self-service portal, which I think is kind of, it's good news, but it is going to mean more work and more planning. I think particularly the whole concept of these request offerings and permission to access these request offerings, it's adding up to a lot more upfront planning to really put this together. So this gets to, this slide on hardware and software requirements gets to the question that Brian asked a little bit earlier. But just to give you kind of the overview of what's changing here, component by component, there is no more support for Windows XP. Your Service Manager client is not going to run in Windows XP. It's a minimum of, I forget what version of Windows Vista or, as you can imagine, Windows 7. You'll need Silverlight 4 to access the portal. It's probably worth noting, while I don't have it here, this question comes up a lot. There is no web client for Service Manager 2010. There will be no web client for Service Manager 2012 either. We've had a lot of customers, frankly, just expect it and kind of wonder where it is. And as I said, unfortunately, it's not available in either version of the product. There is a company called GridPro that makes a third-party add-on for web client for 2010. I'm assuming they'll make it for 2012 as well. But you do have to keep in mind, to get all the functionality, you do need the full client. There haven't been any hardware changes. They have increased the scalability to 50,000 users now. And my understanding in general is that there are some nice performance improvements. We've only run it in a lab and haven't really been able to test performance. But I'm told by a few people who have been able to do so that the performance is definitely improved in 2012. The management server, you'll need the latest version of Windows Server. The portal we touched on, I think, a little bit earlier, that you're going to need SharePoint 2010. You can run it on any version, but for analytics, you do require the Enterprise Edition. And then the DW Management Server, again, latest version of Windows Server. There are no changes on the SQL side. So just kind of a snapshot of what's changed in terms of hardware and software. I also just want to cover the upgrade path here. Just so you know what to expect here, the supported path today is an in-place upgrade. So this is not going to be a data migration. You're going to take your production installation of 2010, if you've got that, if you're not starting from scratch, and you're going to upgrade that environment. So things like user roles, things that are configured in your unsealed management packs, your custom reports, they're going to remain unchanged. The trick to this one, as we see it, is just the limited window you're going to have. If you're running a production system, particularly if you're running extended hours, you'll have obviously a limited time to do this. It'll require a lot of planning. What Microsoft is saying basically is we expect that you're going to start a 2012 lab. They are, I just learned earlier this week by talking to a premier engineer that works on Service Manager, that they are putting together a methodology to allow you to migrate your 2010 production data to your 2012 lab so that you can actually build your lab with real production data, which is important. I haven't seen that yet. I understand it's complex, but I do think that's pretty essential given the supported upgrade path. If you've added properties to Service Manager, you should be okay. Forms, you're probably not going to be okay. I think you're just going to want to redo the forms. One of the things that you'll notice when you get a look at 2012 is that the forms have changed, not necessarily extensively, but enough that you're probably going to need to redo those customizations. It's probably not the worst thing in the world. Workflow, you know, it depends on what you've got the workflow doing, because there are some enhancements to workflow and just some new functionality in Service Manager 2012. So some of the things that you may have built, some of the custom workflows that you may have built may simply not be needed in Service Manager 2012, and you may be able to abandon them and then just replace them with native functionality. And as we talked about, the portal is just gone. You're going to have to abandon whatever you've done there, and you'll have to migrate it to the SharePoint version. So the upgrade is going to be from the latest 2010 version to the 2012 RTM. And the latest current version of Service Manager 2010 is SP1 CU3. Cumulative Update 3 came out within the last couple of weeks. Also worth noting that you can't mix your 2010 and your 2012 components. So you can't run 2010 consoles against 2010 consoles against 2012 servers. That won't work. It's all got to be upgraded. Okay, so service management in Service Manager 2012. This is kind of a different look at the same graphic that we've seen throughout the presentation. We've got our CMDB. We've got more work items now. We've got our CIs, which are, I mean, a lot of different things are in technical terms, CIs in Service Manager, but we've got mainly our affected services and our affected items as our CIs, and we've obviously got our knowledge articles. We know we've got our portal, which, as I had said, is, to me, kind of like the storefront. So this is where our end users are going to come to request things, and where our IT folks can come to get data that they need. Our CIs are going to get populated from our connectors, which connect us to other System Center components. We can do some automation of our work items with Orchestrator. It's probably worth noting we can trigger runbooks with Orchestrator, but we can also do some automation within Service Manager using Orchestrator as well. So if there's some workflow that we can't do natively in Service Manager, we may be able to actually achieve it with Orchestrator. So as I look at this, I think about, and you probably know where I'm headed with this, I think about people, process, and technology. I think of the portal really being, as I say, the storefront where people come to interact with the system. Our work items and the automation that we can do with Orchestrator really facilitate our processes. And I still think fundamentally this is a work management application. It's about what you do. And then, of course, we have access to technology through the CIs in our CMDB, pulling all of that stuff in from our connectors. And one of the tricks here, if you can see, I've got a lot of lines on here, but I'm drawing a lot of stuff back to affected services. I mentioned earlier, it's very easy to relate different items in Service Manager, and I think that's part of the power of the application. We can relate things back to affected services. We can relate work items, configuration items. We could relate request offerings. Beyond that, I don't have the line here, but knowledge articles, data. And you can start to get, I think, a better picture of how your services are performing by doing so. I don't know that every customer is going to be ready to take that step right away, and they may have to work toward it. It's probably also worth noting, and I think this is where a lot of our customers are. Certainly what we see is a very incremental approach to implementing Service Manager. It's not do everything all at once. It's, you know, we often start with one or two work items, and then we kind of work from there. Part of it is because the system is new, you have to learn how to use it, learn how you want to work with the system. But I definitely see where Microsoft is headed with this, and I think they're headed very much toward much more integrated and, in many cases, much more automated management of IT services. So I think there's a lot of promise here. As I say, it may take a while for individual users of Service Manager to get there. I do think it's important to kind of have a vision in mind for it so that as you are building piece by piece, you know that you're building in the right direction. So Ron, why don't I hand it over to you, because I think you have a few things that you want to talk about at this point about Savision.
So as you may know, Savision is on a mission to help you have the fastest time to resolution of your IT problems. And so as we're talking about the new releases coming from Microsoft, I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes describing how Savision works and how we will continue to be a critical component of your IT management strategy in the future. For those of you who don't know, Live Maps provides a dynamic and visual overview of the health of your IT infrastructure. More than just a collection of red, green indicators, Live Maps gives you a business context to help your IT department prioritize which alerts to respond to first based on the business impact of the potential issue. As you drill down through Live Maps, Vital Signs takes over to help you pinpoint the exact source of the alerts up to 80% faster than with Ops Manager alone. The end result is you can manage larger, more diverse IT environments with existing IT professionals. And with a new wave of System Center products around the corner, Savision is investing heavily to make it even easier to integrate our products into your day-to-day service management processes. For those of you who may not be familiar with Live Maps or Vital Signs, I'm just going to give a quick overview here. So this is starting with a high-level real-time dashboard with the ability to drill down into the detailed maps and root cause assessment. This here is a view of a Live Maps management dashboard, just one of many visualization options that can be customized for any audience, senior management, middle management, or even application managers, with views by application or geography, topology, or even business process. Each map is web-enabled and accessible through any browser. And each map shows the status of the business services and views that are important to you. In this case, we're seeing here an alert under business applications. By simply clicking, we can dig a little bit deeper, and we're presented with an end-to-end service map. The first thing you'll notice is that Live Maps provides more than a list of obscure server names. We actually present you the business context of the IT assets in question. You will also notice that we have Ops Manager console integration, which means that customers can leverage their current SCOM infrastructure to implement Live Maps, with no additional hardware investments. We add functionality to Operations Manager without losing standard SCOM functionality. Pardon me, folks. There we go. Sorry. Pardon me, technical difficulty. Moving on, let's, for the sake of the demonstration, I'm going to click here on the little X. And so now that we've identified the IT component that is the source of the problem, Vital Signs kicks in and allows us to pinpoint the exact source of the problem. Real-time performance metrics show us what is going on right now, and we also have the ability to look at historical trends that may have led to the problem in the first place. And with a new wave of System Center products around the corner, as I mentioned earlier, we are investing heavily to make it even easier to integrate our products into your day-to-day service management processes. We're making the investments so you won't have to. If you've already laid the foundation of a Live Maps implementation for your environment, you will be ready for Service Manager 2012. Savision customers that are or are planning to work with either Service Manager 2010 or 2012 will see even more benefits from their Live Maps investment with the ability to model and visualize their business applications with the Live Maps for Operations Manager. So for example, you can automatically keep your Service Manager business service in sync with your service definition in Ops Manager without difficult technical procedures. You can open a real-time service map from the Service Manager console for quicker root cause analysis and resolution times. Incidents are automatically associated with the affected service manager business service to determine the direct impact of the outage. You will also be able to run what-if scenarios. If you're planning a change and would like to see which service manager business services will be affected, you'll be able to do that. All of these cool features will be a reality in the upcoming release of Live Maps for Operations Manager. Our current beta customers have confirmed that this new integration saves them an enormous amount of time in impact analysis, root cause determination, and that it accelerates resolution times. Furthermore, it will be much easier to measure and report performance related to the business services they are responsible for. If you all have already measured or modeled your business applications with Live Maps, you will be up and running with this new integration in no time. So thank you all for your attention as I've described how Savision works today and how it is going to work with future Microsoft releases. With that, let me turn it back over to you, Pete, and we can, if there's time, if there's other high-level topics you wanted to touch on, we can do that, or we can take a look at the Q&A.
These are just some slides that I had prepared already, and I thought, again, folks might be interested in seeing a few things. One of the things you're going to be able to do, this will be most relevant to people who are familiar with 2010, is you'll be able to do a little bit more filtering with these LDAP query filters in the Active Directory connector. So, it'll just help you be a little bit more specific about what you do and don't want to bring across. For those who aren't familiar, the AD connector in Service Manager 2010, it's nice, but it brings a lot of data across, and you don't necessarily have all the flexibility in the world in terms of what you do and don't bring across. So these filters are going to allow you to be a little bit more granular in what you bring across and hopefully keep that a little bit cleaner. Your user pickers in Service Manager, any place that you're going to actually select a user, whether it's an affected end user or the assignee on a record, they're going to ultimately be pulling data from Active Directory. So that's why that ends up being important. And we touched a little bit just in the earlier part of the presentation on there'll be some enhancements to the existing connectors to be able to take advantage of new functionality in the most recent versions of other System Center products, and then the Exchange connector is being updated as well. So I see we've had another question. Has the asset management part of 2012 been improved? It kind of depends on what you mean by asset management. One of the things that Microsoft really doesn't promote Service Manager as is an asset management platform. There is a third-party product called Provence ITAM that does asset management. You could also potentially, again, depending upon your definition of IT management, of IT asset management, which I find varies from customer to customer, you could also probably do some customization, whether to 2010 or to 2012, to meet your specific objectives. The parent-child relationships I talked about earlier, this gives you an idea about how those get configured, and you've got a couple of different options here with respect to resolution, reactivation, and status. I'm not sure this is going to be a feature that people are going to use a lot, but I can see it being useful, as I think I mentioned earlier, in situations where you might have a major incident where you'd have something that causes an outage or affects a significant number of users, and you want to be able to roll all of that stuff up into one parent record. This set first response, I think, is a nice feature, I guess only because it's not very easy to do without some customization today. So we can actually go in and mark an incident acknowledged or responded, which I can tell you for a lot of our customers is a big deal because many of them have SLAs around that and want to be able to, at the very least, manage internally, want to be able to make sure that stuff is getting picked up in a timely fashion.
Okay, we're just at the top of the hour. If there's another slide you wanted to touch on, Pete, we can do that. Otherwise, I may just move into the final poll question of the afternoon and send people on their way for the rest of the day.
No, I'll just, if you want, I'll answer this last question here about tenancy for managed service providers. I'm not aware of any improvements to Service Manager 2012 that are going to make it suited to multi-tenancy. It's not really designed that way in 2010. And as I say, I'm not aware of anything in 2012 that's changed. I'm not sure if that's something that Microsoft has had in the middle of their radar screen. I'm sure it's been requested, but I don't know of anything right now.
And with that, thank you everyone again for joining us on this webinar today. Thank you especially to Pete for being our guest speaker today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, it is indeed our pleasure. So with that, we'll let this last poll wrap up, and I guess we'll call that an afternoon, folks. Thanks again, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the webinar now. Thank you.